There you go. So a little bit about Action Funder before we jump into the workshop. For those of you who do not know, Action Funder is a funding platform that we launched in May this year. It's designed to help community groups save time on funding applications by matching your projects with all relevant funds on the platform. Funds are coming from businesses, foundations, and we've already had 23 live funds in the last 6 months. That represents over £300,000 distributed and still up for grabs as we speak. It's free to use for community groups, and all you have to do is sign up, post a project that you need funding for, or create a video application. When a fund launches that matches your project, you're automatically matched with it. So all you have to do afterwards is wait to receive the notification that a funder wants to fund you and accept it. And if you're not funded on the first time, it's fine. Your project remains live and will be matched with other funds. So it's very easy and straightforward to use, and you can then post updates to celebrate your achievements and fill in your impact report that will be automatically shared with the funders. And if you have any questions about Action Funder, do stick around at the end of the workshop and I'll do my best to answer them. So it's really nice to see so many of you here today. In the room we have Kerry from West Oxfordshire. We have Lauren from the Climax Centre in London. Hello. Kirsty from Yellow Door in Southampton. Nice to see so many of you here. Today in the room is Karina Hartwig, the brilliant person behind the Funding Doctor, and she'll be delivering today's workshop. Karina has helped many community organizations, charities, and social enterprises find funding. She's worked extensively across the world of fundraising support for the likes of the Big Lottery Fund, the EU Rural Development Funding Programme, and the Plunkett Foundation. She's delivered loads of workshops as well for then communities, voluntary sector training, and of course, Action Funder. And perhaps most important of all, she has personal experience of community projects and setting up small enterprises. And on that note, I will hand over to you, Karina.
Thank you very much, Karine. Thank you for the kind introduction. And thank you also to the lovely Action Funder team for having me again. And hello to you all in the room. Karine, can we maybe kickstart off the presentation? There we go. I just need to quickly have a little look. That's it. Hopefully you can all see the first slide, and I will kick off telling you all about how to speak the funder's language. So hello again, I am Karina, and I'm also known as the Funding Doctor. I want to share with you my experience as a volunteer for a successful community project and also as a grant maker. As you can imagine, I had to learn a lot and fast, especially around being crystal clear with my ask or with your ask when it comes to your project pitch. And everything you learn today should help you with this. So some of you might know me, but for those of you who don't, again, a warm welcome to this first workshop in the autumn series with focus on youth projects. We're going to talk about speaking a new language, this of the funders, and don't be afraid. Speaking a new language today is not that difficult. It's fairly easy, and hopefully I can make it a bit more accessible to you all so that you can go and secure all that funding on Action Funder. Because if I learned this new language to secure funding to transform lives, you can too. The next slide, Perrin, please. I want to give you a quick overview of what we are going to cover in the next 20 minutes or so. We're going to look at focus areas first and why these are relevant to secure funding on Action Funder. Then we're going to look at outcomes to get you up to speed with the funding jargon so that you're fluent in speaking the funder's language. And it is important to really understand a few key words and their meaning as part of you making a clear ask for funding. And finally, we're going to briefly look at the storytelling to make sure that you're using all the funding power words to pull at the funder's heartstrings to secure that all-important funding. So without further ado, let's get started. And as a warm-up, I would like us to look at a word search to highlight the most important terminology. The most important words that you will need to learn and understand are, and they are at the bottom of the word search: beneficiary, evaluation, outcome, output, need, monitoring, activity, problem, and aim. And these are in no particular order. As you can see, I circled the problem, outcome, beneficiary, and output for you, as you will be asked to go into more detail in your project pitch on the Action Funder platform. And if you recognize most of those words and think you know their meaning, great. But if you didn't, don't worry, I will explain the meaning of each of these today. So now, hopefully, you'll be ready to come with me and dive a little bit deeper into the world of the funder and to master their language. So let's look at focus areas next. When you want to learn the funder's language, the first thing you need to do is to understand their point of view. Where are they coming from? What's in it for the funder? Why are they funding? And I will try to unpick this a bit so that you're finding it easier to speak the funder's language. Well, when you look at this photo, do you recognize these motivators in yourself? The doing good, the feel good, and the look good. And is that what drives you to get a community project off the ground? I see some of you nodding here in the room. So great, because you and the funder have exactly the same motivators in common. And I will tell you a little bit more in the next slide. Funders do not fund for the fun of funding. Funders have an agenda for funding, a reason to fund projects. They want to see their money doing good, more and more locally. And different funders will have different areas of focus or interest because they know there is a need and they want to do something about it. The funders on Action Funder know that it's a good idea for the world and for their business to do purposeful things, like giving to charities, to social enterprises or community groups. By giving with Action Funder, they get to fund like-minded organizations like yours in their local area and get stories and impact reporting to showcase the difference they make. These areas are, broadly speaking, in alphabetical order: arts and culture, animal welfare, education and employment, climate and nature, food action, mental health and well-being, neighborhood, physical health and sport, poverty and homelessness, sustainable consumption and production. These are all on the Action Funder website and are loosely based on the global goals for sustainable development. And you might have noticed that actually there is not one focus area for youth projects. We'll come to that in a minute. So they all want to do good in these areas that are aligned with their businesses, possibly aligned to their corporate social responsibility agenda, and around areas that their audiences and customers care about. Your job is to select at least one category that aligns with what your organization does, considering the services and activities that you provide and the changes that you're hoping to produce. Further, it helps to do a bit of research about the funder to see what rocks his or her boat around doing good. Next slide, please, Perrine. Thank you. Now, when we do good, it makes us feel good. And this is my second little sign here. And automatically, we have a big smile on our faces. We start to have a purpose, and if we put ourselves back in the shoes of the funder, it will make us feel good if we see that things improve and get better in our local areas and in the focus areas that we care about. And when we all have this massive smile on our faces, it makes us all together look good. Not just because looking at a friendly, smiling face is nice. Next slide. Now, funders also want to look good in terms of knowing that their funding creates a ripple effect of happiness to many more people over a longer period of time, which is also called impact. Additionally, the funder is most likely to be accountable to demonstrate that their money is making a difference. And that is why it's crucial that you can demonstrate your impact and that you have a solid budget. By the way, we'll be running a short webinar on budgeting at the beginning of December. So watch out for the next Action Funder email from Perrine. Your job is to tell the funder how your project is helping them to look good. So they're often too remote from local grassroots needs, that the funders is, and rely on you to do the good in your areas, but with their funding. And the last aspect of looking good I'm inviting you to think about is how your project fits in with local strategies, with regional ones, perhaps even national ones, or even global ones, again, also from the funder's point of view. It's important to kind of be a little bit aware of your kind of local strategies, that because it allows you to join in the conversation, teaches you more about the language, demonstrates your awareness of these and how they're relevant to your project. And it can also cement a feeling of trust. And all this really makes you look good, knowledgeable and trustworthy from the funder's point of view. Next slide, please. Now you understand the funder a bit better. It's time to look at outcomes. When you want to speak the funder's language fluently, it is really important to be crystal clear about outcomes, because these are what funders fund. And outcomes are the changes that your project brings about. In the next few slides, I want us to briefly look at the outcome triangle that I have adapted from the Charities Evaluation Services, now under the NCVO, to help you formulate your outcomes better, so that the funder totally gets what positive changes you are trying to achieve through your activity. So your project is about positive change. I would like us to use the example of a pop-up youth club to illustrate the outcome triangle and its outcomes. In our fictive example of our pop-up youth club, the youth club offers experimenting with music instruments in sessions, making music, but also some one-to-one mentoring around building confidence and communication. Next slide, please. And here is the outcome triangle. The outcome triangle is really useful to demonstrate the correlation of the different elements of your project and how these bring on the changes that you're aiming for. Essentially, it helps you to illustrate what changes your program or initiative produces. Let's take a closer look by starting at the bottom of the triangle. Most of you will naturally start by describing your activities or interventions. In our example of the pop-up youth club, let's say one of our activities is music making, or a different activity could be running one-to-one mentoring sessions. And you will also have a series of outputs linked to your activities. Now, outputs are the results which are achieved immediately after implementing an activity. In our example, the number of young people who have picked up a new instrument for the first time would be an output, or the number of young people who have attended one-to-one mentoring sessions would be an output. But funders do not fund activities and their outputs, which are at the bottom of the triangle. Funders fund outcomes, which are the medium-term changes or results of your activities. It really helps to focus in particular on the pink outcomes block in the middle. Many funding applications fail because applicants forget to define clear outcomes. as there is a tendency to get carried away with just describing the activities. We will come back to outcomes in a minute. Let's just take another look around the pyramid and the other elements. So in order to speak successfully the funder's language, you will also need to describe which problem you have identified and why the problem exists. These are the underlying causes. For this, it is really helpful to carefully listen to your community, and that's why it's represented by the little ear, to dig deeper, to truly understand the problem and why it exists. For example, the problem in our example could be that there is a greater number of young people who have nothing to do in their free time in the area and finding it hard to connect with their peers. The underlying problem could be that the pandemic has caused greater levels of anxiety due to more young people feeling lonely and isolated. There's nowhere welcoming or safe for them to meet locally. You will also need to explain and demonstrate to the funder how big and important the problem is, and this is what's called the need. For this, you will need to look at local statistics and official surveys and speak perhaps to your local authorities about that as well. Once you have truly understood the problem and the need for your project, you will be in a position to propose your solution to the problem, which is the overall point of your project and its aim, which is right at the top of the triangle. And you will also need to tell the funder whose lives will change for the better because of your initiative. And this group of people is called the beneficiaries that you also see on the pyramid. And finally, the bit that the funders really fund, we arrive back at the pink middle block, the outcomes, which are desired midterm changes that are expected to happen in a particular context. Only when you have defined your outcomes will you be able to measure the impact. You should also tell the funder how you will measure the changes and over which period of time. And finally, the impact are the changes over a longer period of time to a greater group of people. Next slide, please. If you are a little bit confused now, please don't worry. There is a really useful analogy that can help you with defining your outcomes. It's the analogy of stepping through the door. The door allows you to step from the current grim situation into the newly improved, much better space. And all you need to do is describe what has changed for the better. So let's use our example of a pop-up youth club project to illustrate this. Next slide, please. Here is what the young person and space currently looks like. The young person looks sad and the space slightly unloved and underused. No one is out and about. It's just not used. There is a sense of loneliness and a lack of belonging and purpose. And there's certainly not much going on either. When the young person steps through the door into the new space, next slide. Next slide, the young person steps into your pop-up youth club and steps into this vibrant community space and takes part in the music sessions. There is a group of young people that are getting involved and trying some instruments, are having fun together. There's a sense of community, purpose, pure joy and fun. So what are outcomes of this example project? Remember, outcomes are the changes, can be positive or negative, that occur as a result of your activities in the short to medium term. Outcomes have to be achieved to support progress towards your overall aim, your longer term goal. Outcomes should use words that indicate change and use active language. So indicating change, for example, is increased or improved or less or decrease, expand, develop, more, better, etc. So could you maybe in the chat just share a few outcomes that our project could bring on, just very quickly. Increase in confidence, absolutely. Thank you, Claire. Improve mental health, less isolation, absolutely. More employability skills, yeah. Better communication. Brilliant. Absolutely, they're all right. They're all absolutely greater feel of security, feeling secure. Yeah, absolutely. Minimizing anxiety. Perfect. Improving emotional well-being. Brilliant. Yes, increase in social engagement. They are all absolutely valid. And I've just kind of mentioned also maybe better self-management of emotions. And yeah, so more stamina when in crisis and at home, absolutely. So that's the better self-management of emotions. And perhaps some of you have said it already, relief from anxiety and a decrease in depression. So brilliant. Now you can all formulate outcomes. But you will also find that you will have some hard outcomes and some soft outcomes. So hard outcomes is a clearly definable and measurable outcome, like getting a job or getting a place on a training course. A soft outcome is a less tangible or more difficult to measure outcome, such as increased self-esteem or improved problem-solving abilities. It also helps a lot to make your outcomes smart, specific, measurable, relevant to your aim, and time-bound, because this links back to the impact measurement indicators that I briefly mentioned earlier. So maybe can you just share in the chat a few ideas of how you could measure outcomes in the chat now? Just some simple ones. So how could you measure? How could you measure that a young person feels better? Yes, that's really important. Beginning, have a measure at the beginning and at the end. Absolutely. Have a baseline. Yeah. And how do you do that? You could ask the young person to say, how do you feel? So, thumbs up, thumbs down, and take a snapshot of that. Their engagement levels. Yeah. Simple evaluation, image-based. Absolutely. Podcasts, surveys, sticky notes, happy face, sad face. And as you said brilliantly, it's very, very important to measure at the beginning of your activity or your intervention, and then again at the end. So I hope that the analogy of stepping through the door has helped you to define the outcomes. And I would just like the next slide, please, Karine, because I would like to link that back now to kind of our focus areas that I talked about at the beginning. So question to you all, which focus areas would our project come under on the Action Funder platform, even though there isn't one for the young people? And I've kind of helped you a little bit here on the slide already. I'm kind of looking at the chat, but I just help us because we are a little bit limited in time. So the focus areas that you would tick for our example are arts and culture, because that includes music, mental health and well-being, absolutely, because our outcomes are very much anchored around that. And it could also be neighborhood, because if you are thinking about putting on some pop-up youth clubs or hubs, then surely you're doing something that improves the neighborhood as well. So these are kind of the focus areas that you could have ticked, for example, for that project. And hopefully you are now in a better place to speak the funders' language and be crystal clear about your outcomes, because as you know, these are what the funders fund. Next slide, please, Karine, because I would like to kind of tell you a little bit now about telling a compelling story, which is absolutely vital in your kind of pitch. Let me give you a few pointers on how to do that best, so that you can pull at the funder's heartstrings and convince the funder to fund you. I would like to take a couple of minutes to use some of the tips of the lovely Teresa Litzer at Lightful, who has run a storytelling webinar in the past for Action Funder. And you will get a link from us as well to watch this webinar back if you like. Because helping you to tell a compelling story that really triggers the desired action from the funder is so important. And what you want the funder to do is to give you the funds and not fund the project that it's down the road or perhaps in this room. So, well, you will have to prepare a narrative of your story and a video pitch on Action Funder. For both, you can use the storytelling arc and use all the elements from your outcome triangle. There are basic elements that make up a compelling story, and it's important to have a structure, and the arc can help you with it. And here it is how. Have a beginning in which you introduce yourselves, state the problem, its underlying causes, and how big the problem is. Remember the need. And use a hook, something that makes the funder curious about your project and shows that you know what problems the funder deeply cares about and wants to solve too. Then you progress to the middle, which is also called the plot. And here is where you define your specific solution to the problem in more detail. And you explain who benefits from it. And you describe how sad the actual current situation is and what barriers and obstacles you need to overcome. And of course, that includes the lack of money or funds. The climax should be describing your top outcomes, so the changes that your project will bring about if you have the funder support. And the climax should also describe what difference your project will make in the short and medium term and what impact it will have in the longer run for many more people. If only you had the funder support. Show your passion and your excitement here. You are making the funder part of your solution by binding him or her emotionally into your project. During the resolution, where you transition towards the end of your story, you can state what help you need. And as you have done your homework and worked out your budget, you can tell the funder exactly how much you need and what for. And finally, at the end of your story, your bid, don't forget to make the ask. Invite the funder to fund you. And as I said, we will share the link to the recorded webinar all around storytelling from Teresa. Next slide, please. And by the way, if you're writing the storyboard for your video pitch, you have about 150 words that you can fit into your 90 seconds of video time. So have to be crystal clear and concise again. But the strong story helps you to underpin your funding bid and helps you to pull at the funder's heartstrings by combining emotions and actions. And don't forget to ask, because if you don't ask, you don't get. Next slide, please. This brings us to the end of our time together we have today. Hopefully you feel more confident in speaking the lingo. Perhaps you are now fluent, or today has made you a master. Remember to be crystal clear in your project pitch about your outcomes, your outputs, and who will be your beneficiaries. Make sure that you choose the correct focus area and the funder that you know wants to do good in the same areas as you do. You will be both known for what you're talking about, and it will be a perfect match when it comes to doing good. Make sure you look good, do your homework, tell a compelling story, and together with the funder, you will feel good. And if you want to look better than anyone else, well, you'll need to prove that you're doing the maximum good to the maximum number of people by proving that you're addressing a need and you will have a greater impact. So that's all from me. Thank you and good luck. And we have a few minutes to take some questions.
Thank you, Karina. That was brilliant. Really hope you now feel a bit more empowered to speak the funders' language and potentially upload a project on Action Funder as well. We'll be sending a follow-up email in the week with ways to contact Karina, the slides that you just saw, info on the next workshop, the recording as well, and a short survey that only takes 2 minutes to fill. For those of you who have to head off and have your lunch, it was a pleasure to have you here, and we hope to see you next time. And if you'd like to stick around and ask a few questions on the workshop or on Action Funder, please do so. Do we have any questions in the chat? Kerry, you can share the recording with your colleagues. It'll be actually uploaded on YouTube, so you can share.
There was one question whether Action Funder charges.
Sorry, can you say that again? I can't see.
Paul asked, do Action Funder charge us or the funders?
Absolutely not. So the funders are charged a fee when uploading a fund, but it's free for community group to use, and you'll get the entire grant money.
Oh, and here's the question, probably more for me, from Esther. What's the best way to discover funders' focus areas? That is by doing a little bit of research around the funders. Most of them are kind of businesses, so it's always good to have a little look on their socials, what they care about, what their customers care about as well, and perhaps at their corporate social responsibility strategies as well. Or you could kind of speak to them as well. Ask the marketing department at the funders, they will tell you.
I've just sent the link to Action Funder in the chat. Sorry, I hadn't done this before. So if you want to have a look at the platform, just go ahead. And we have a live chat as well. So if you have any questions while setting up, do ask away.
Sorry, Karine. Lynn has a question for you. Can we get details for how to sign up to Action Funder, please?
I've just sent the website. So just on signing up, it's really easy. You just sign up, add your email, password, and then your organization's details. So whether you're a charity, but you can also be a community group, you can be a community business, social enterprise. It's all listed on the website. We have, I'll just send you this page. That might be a bit more useful, where you'll find an FAQ and how it works for community groups and charities. Can we add a project to Action Funder which involves funding, coordinator, salaries? You can. We usually recommend that some of your project budget breakdown should also involve, I don't know actually how to say that, actual activities, but it's absolutely fine to have salaries involved in them. Are there things that Action Funder definitely do not fund? I don't think so. I will get back to my colleagues on this one, but I don't think we don't have any. I mean, we have obviously we have a chart for content, so we will not fund projects that are offensive or harmful to anyone, but that's about it. I'm just going to stop the recording now. We have time for a couple questions. If anyone has a question on the workshop or Action Funder,